I got 1 minute to go according to my clock here.
And we are live on YouTube.
Here we are. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the special board meeting. This is a joint budget work session with the Board of Directors, the Fiscal Committee, and staff. It is Monday, October 4th at 8 p.m. I hereby call this meeting to order, having established quorum. I have no opening comments. I need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda, but I have a couple of minor tweaks to that. On item A, there is no consent calendar tonight, so I am proposing that we amend the agenda to delete that. That's item A, A1. And then item C, I just wanted to add our capital projects director, Chris Shoemaker, as one of the directors tonight. So, yes, John.
When we spoke earlier today, I believe you were going to add contractual matters to item B. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, John, for that reminder. Yes, so the executive session item D will be personnel matters and contractual matters. So if I could have a motion to to adopt the meeting agenda for tonight as amended.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second? Thank you, John.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. All those in favor? Anybody opposed out there? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is member comments. Christina, has anyone signed up?
Nobody is signed up, but I don't believe we have any members in attendance. If there are and I'm not seeing you, please raise your hand.
No raised hands? Okay, then moving on to item C, which is the kickoff to this work session. And I am going to turn this over to our presenters for tonight, who include our treasurer, Bob Petrine, Scott Sievers, Fiscal Committee Chair, Larry Butler, our acting CEO, Tom Deal, our Director of Finance, and Chris Shoemaker, our Capital Projects Director. So the first item up is the 2021 forecast for revenue and expenses.
Karen, if I can, this is Larry.
Yes.
I'm going to ask Tom to just do a quick review of the updated 21 forecast, because the last time a forecast was presented, particularly to Fiscal Committee, there were 3 department heads who were not around for vacation and other reasons, and so we've got a more accurate forecast. So I don't know if we want.
Okay, thank you. And excuse me, Larry, but I'm just looking, I see Michelle is here, our new Fiscal Committee member. I neglected to introduce the board directors and the Fiscal Committee members, but it's probably not necessary tonight. But I do see Ken, is that Ken Adams? Is that the Ken who's on our Fiscal Committee? And I'm not sure who Brian is, if that is a Fiscal Committee member or.
It's most likely Brian Gerga.
Okay, and Dave Kerr, Fiscal Committee, is on. Okay, and then we have, I'm sorry, I'm doing this out of order. Please forgive me, but I neglected to do this. So in addition to myself, we have Bob Petrine, our treasurer and at-large director, John Mooney, our vice president and North Point director, and we have Aaron Webb, our Lake Ann Tall Oaks director, and we have Tom Mulcairn, at-large director, Jennifer Juszczyk, secretary and South Lakes director, and Mike Collins, category B apartment owners representative, and Tim Dowling, at-large director. I think I got all the board members. And Scott Severs, who is the new fiscal committee chair. And fiscal committee members, Dave Kerr and Ken Adams and Brian's last name.
Gurga.
Thank you. I think that's all. And Michelle, our newest fiscal committee member, Michelle Gunn.
And Sarah, Sarah's here too.
Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm going too fast. Back to the board directors, Sarah Salvarez de Souza, who is our at-large director.
Yeah.
Okay. And then staff, we have, in addition to Larry, our acting CEO, we have, of course, this is probably everybody, right? We're just introducing ourselves to each other. We have Tom Deal, our Director of Finance, and we have Anthony Champ, our General Counsel, and we have Cam Adams, our Covenants Director, Chris Shoemaker, Capital Projects Director, and we have Laura Kowalski, Parks and Rec Director, Melissa Kelly, HR Director, and Mike Leone, Communications Director, and I know your titles are all longer than that, and Sean Barami, our Media Manager. I think I got everybody. Okay. Larry, go ahead.
All right,
Sorry.
great to get the introductions out of the way.
Yeah.
Well, to kick this off, we're try to stick to this agenda here. I don't have a formal presentation. We went through a lot of that. I think we've sent the board a lot of materials to study, peruse, understand, etc. And so hopefully tonight is a good dialogue about what you all believe the priorities should be going forward into 2022 and 2023. So I'm going to have Tom do a review of our 21 forecast, which was updated. Then we're going to have Chris talk a little bit about the capital budget. I don't think, this is my recommendation, that we not spend a lot of time on the capital budget. I think Chris has done a really good job of kind of leveling the playing field, so to speak, going forward. And I think most of the questions are going to come up on the operating side. So I think that's where we should probably save the most amount of time, and hopefully also get to touch on item C4, which is funding alternatives, something the fiscal committee's talked about and the board has touched on a couple times as well, and what that really means. And so that's kind of what I see us doing. And I'm going to ask Tom, I don't know who's doing the screen sharing, if that's Mike Leone, but if you can pull up the packet that went out for this meeting, I think the first 4 slides are the forecast that Tom's going to review with you all.
So Mike, if you can pull up page 1 of 4.
Yeah, hang on one second. I have the individual ones. Just give me a minute to pull that up.
So I kind of revamped the spreadsheet to try to put information that was alike together instead of cramming it all on that long page that had been presented before.
Tom, the board packet that I'm looking at does not contain any
6 of
spreadsheets.
22.
Is it helpful if I share my screen?
Do you have it, Christina?
I do. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, can you see this?
Hasn't popped up yet.
It has, here, let me try one more time. Actually, my computer is not frozen.
what I have is 2022, 2023.
In the full packet, Mike, it's page 6, if that's helpful.
Let me go back and look.
I'm going to see if I can pop it up.
Yeah, let me see. I think this is the one. I think I've got it for you now.
Christina, can you take down your screen share if Mike's trying to do his?
My
Are you,
computer is
are you
complete.
seeing the screen now?
No, mine's frozen on. Christina Easterly has started screen sharing, but if her computer's frozen, that's not good.
Here we go.
Yeah.
There you go. So
We'll get proficient with this just about the time that we don't use Zoom anymore.
Is my screen not showing?
No, it
yeah,
is.
no, it's up.
We're good.
Very good.
All right, just to go over the sheet itself, since this is new, the first page is all the revenue. In column 1 is 2019 actuals. Column 2 is 2021 budget. Column 3 is 2021 forecast. Column 4 is 2022 budget. Column 5 is 2023 budget. And then column 6 is a comparison that gives the variance between the 21 forecast and the 19 actuals. And that last column is the 22 budget versus the 21 forecast. So as Larry alluded, the forecast is January through August actuals, but then it's September through December at this point, a forecast from the various department managers or SLT that are responsible for those cost centers. So as you can see, we forecasted $19,210,808, and that's compared to the budget of $19,206,514. So would there be any questions as far as this format? Any questions on the forecast itself? As far as the revenue?
Tom, this is Bob. On the 22 and 23 budgets, what assumptions did you use for assessments? Both number of members and assessment rate.
So that's based on that 21,350 that you'll see on page 3. Basically, that is the revenue then to make the net contribution work with the RRF and the CARF funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So page 2. Then this is a breakdown, the same column format, but this is the expenses and it's presented by cost center. As you can see, communications 1,100, computer support 1,200, corporate and board 1,300. You got it all the way down. So again, this is August through August year-to-date actuals, and then what each person had submitted to me as far as a forecast for those remaining months. And as you can see, the total operating expenses are forecasted to be that $15,633,996, and that would lead to almost 3.6 million in a net contribution to capital.
Excuse me, Tom, quick question.
Sure.
What are the, maybe you said this, I apologize for missing it. What does the A, B, F mean?
So, okay, yeah, good question. A is for actuals. So that first column would be 2018 actuals. The second column, the B stands for budget.
Okay.
Third column, the F stands for forecast. And then the next 2 columns are budget, And
Got
then the last two columns are just variances between
Right.
like the 21 forecast and 19
Right.
actual.
Okay. Okay, I got it. Thanks very much.
Sure, no problem.
We're excluding 2020 just because it was such an aberrant year.
When Larry asked everyone to take a look at the budget for 22 and 23, we came to the conclusion that 2019 was more of a
Typical year.
actual that would be the same as the 22
Yeah.
budget.
Yep.
And because of COVID, 2020 was a massaged year just to try to make things
Right.
work out. So any other questions on the cost center presentation?
Tom, let me ask, both revenue and total revenue and total expenses show positive variances for 2021. Do you have a view as to the drivers behind those variances? Were they, in other words, were they extraordinary items, or was this, you just did besides doing just a bang up job, are anything that sticks out that we should be aware of?
Are you talking about the 21 forecast to the 19 actuals?
No, the 21 forecast, yes.
Or compared to the 19 actuals or the 22 budget?
Yeah, the 21 budget to the 21 forecast.
So, going down.
Because I see, for example, in total operating expenses were budgeted at 15,935,000, and it looks like they'll come in at 15,633. So about, even I can do this, about 300,000 positive variance. Does something stick out as to that drove that, or?
Yeah, most of that is permanent timing of salaries and wages due to some of the positions not being filled and the attrition that's happened through the year.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom. This is Michelle. I have a quick question regarding 21 forecast to 2022 budget. For
Okay.
the lakes, ponds, and streams, why is the revenue went down 300,000, but then the costs went up 100,000?
So we had received money, and Larry probably could pipe in more on this, but we had received money way in excess of what we had budgeted in 2021. And we don't feel that the same money will come in 2022.
Yeah, and to be just a little bit more specific, that's from the stream restoration program, where we get revenues from the sale of either the actual restoration work or the research work. And we had not anticipated that large amount to come in. And I went and checked with Northern Virginia Stream Restoration, and they don't anticipate we're going to have anything like that in 2022. The increase in expenses is primarily for our lake management activities, which, as those who were on the listening session earlier, we did a much better job this year proactively managing some of the algae and aquatic plants, and we intend to do the same next year. And one of the other things that you'll note too is that although it's not as obvious as it is in the lakes, ponds, and streams, in pathways, lakes, ponds, and streams, rec areas, and natural areas, we've also included in the 22 draft additional seasonal dollars to support the activities there.
Thank you.
And also they carry a heavier load of the insurance that increased in 2022.
I have a couple of questions and a few asks. Tom, this is just personally for me. If you can send us the itemized for the corporate and board line item. Just curiosity, would like to see what we're costing. The other piece again is the lake house. Is there a reason our projections. It's great that the expenses are going down. I'm not complaining at all, but I'm just trying to understand what are we doing differently? That in the budgeted, the numbers are almost half of what we did in 2019.
Mike, you want to take that one? Mike Leone?
Sure. Really, we took a pretty significant hit in the first half of the year as a result of the pandemic. Social distancing guidelines as well as gathering sizes were significantly reduced under the governor's executive order. And therefore, we were pretty slow, really off the mark at the beginning of the year. We didn't start to see a significant turnaround in lake house rental activity until around the June time period. And since June, we've actually had a pretty robust rental status, which really right now, looking out through the remainder of the year, we pretty much have at least 2 and in some cases 3 events per weekend night. So we've got a pretty busy schedule. Try to find an open available weekend night through the weekend night through the end of the year. Difficult to find it. So activity starting to pick back up. We're getting busier. We're still not getting rental activity during the Monday through Thursday time period. Specifically, businesses are not renting because they're not doing meetings with their staffs. And we're seeing the same thing on the conference center side. Revenue's way down on the conference center because, again, businesses have been reluctant to do large meetings in the conference center, and we're seeing that. But basically, we were down pretty significantly in the first half of the year as a result of rental activity. People just weren't doing events because in many cases they couldn't have more than 10 people at their gathering.
Are we projecting that that'll be the case? And is that why the expenses for like 2022 budget are like almost half of what you had for 2019 actuals?
Yeah.
Can you address the staffing piece of that from your end?
So the staffing piece for the lake house is actually the member services staffing. So basically our staff in member services, which is the 1,400 budget, we have not had, our seasonal staff has really not been spending as much time at the lake house in the first half of the year. The rest of our expenses, we've not been ordering supplies to the limit that we typically do as well.
I was just wondering if it was artificially the number. Are we going to be surprised when it comes back as actuals and if it's going to be double? But if you think you've got it, thank you.
No, well, I'm feeling pretty confident in it, Sarah.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, you said corporate board, as far as a breakdown on the cost center by functional expense. And what was the other one? I didn't catch it.
That was it, corporate and board.
Corporate board, okay.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no other discussion, questions, page 3.
I just had this, Ken Adams, just looking at big picture numbers, kind of my take on the expenses was that, you know, our 2021 forecast appears to be about 300,000 below 2021 budget. And yet our 2022 budget is almost, I guess, 2 million higher than the 2021 forecast. So I don't know, just big picture, that seems like, do you have any overall feelings on at that kind of an increase, or you just got to go line by line to see, I guess?
Once you get to the expenses by function, it'll become a little more clear.
Okay.
I'll wait to go through and show you the increase there.
All righty. Thanks.
So page 3. This is just the RRF and CARF funding portion. Basically, this is what Chris had put through on a 10-year average you see the funding to triple RF, 3.455 million, and then the CARF, the 650, almost 4,000, to come back to that net contribution of 4.1 million and the 3.7 for the 23 budget. And then that breaks it, that goes back to Bob Train's question, that equivalent units of 21,350 would produce the revenue line on assessments, and that would be the 829 and the 825. Any questions on this sheet?
Tom, just for the board's clarification, I think it's important to highlight the 2021. I think it's, well, in the budget, it was rounding 3.2 million was going to be contributed to triple RF. And then I think it's one page up. If we scroll up to the 2021 forecast, just want to highlight what we're seeing here, or at least what I'm seeing, is that third column over. In the forecast, the net contribution to capital is just under 3.6 million. So I think it's about $400,000 of potential surplus. And I think that's going to be discussed later. Just want to, for those kind of following along, the main takeaway of where we are kind of this year, most importantly, where's our cash first? And then I know we're going to look into the budget for 22, and there's a couple items, but that's the first thing to really hone in on. Is it looks like, I mean, please tell me if I'm misspeaking, but that is a potential benefit here, is that we're going to come in above if everything breaks like we think it will.
Good point, Scott.
Yeah, I was going to mention that this is an exercise where you're taking your program revenues and then forcing the assessment to fall out based on all of your other assumptions, your capital expenditures and your operating expenses. And that forces you up to the assessment number based on how many members will be paying that assessment. This is before Larry comes up with his suggested changes to the alterations to manage the assessment level, correct?
Correct.
So
But I also agree with Scott that there is a bit of a surplus there.
if you go back to page 3. So the equivalent units of 21,350, I think I've explained this in a couple previous board meetings, but just to throw it out there again, we do a calculation based on number of households. We call them PIDs. And there are some that get a relief. It could be because their value of their house or residence is below the threshold. So they get a prorated assessment rate, and they could be in tax relief where it's elderly and they can get a 50% tax credit. And then that factors into to the equivalent units. And then there's also certain apartment units that will receive a tax credit as well. So that's how it comes back to equivalent units. Any questions? Page 4, please. Ken, this should make it a little more clear to you when you see the functional expense side of this. The increase, that 2,958,000 is from wages and salaries, etc., seasonal staff, guards, etc. 220, almost 226,000 of that is other employee expenses, which would be the taxes associated with it, retirement and other benefits, etc. The other big item that sticks out is insurance, as communicated to the board the big increase from the previous year to this year, 22-23 budget. Everything else somewhat falls in line with the 21 forecast. But you see, Ken, that those three items basically make up the majority of that increase.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bulk of it obviously is salaries. Over half.
That's correct. And that line, that top salary line also includes a 3% merit.
Okay.
Are there any questions on this page regarding to the 21 forecast? Hearing none, I'll turn it back to you, Larry.
Actually, I think you got one more. We got one or two more sheets. We just have a little more granular look at the personnel piece. There's two more slides for you, Tom.
Okay. This is a breakdown then of salary expense and other employee expenses. This is what I'm saying. On that salary expense line, you have salary and wages, seasonal salaries, part-time or year-round employees, a merit allowance, overtime, incidental labor, the wages on call, guards, programs, and the tennis seasonal programs. And that makes up the line item. This is salary expense. The other employee benefits or employee expenses are retirement, Social Security and Medicare, FUTA, the federal unemployment, SUTA, the state unemployment, dental, health insurance, life and disability, the workman's comp, and the vision, and then there's also a tuition reimbursement, and then miscellaneous other benefits. And then to round out the total personnel costs, we do analysis for the professional and technical support and the legal services. And the last piece is the staff training and development, and that goes to the total people cost.
This is Michelle Gunn again. Do you have headcount information between the years? Are we anticipate to hire additional personnel? And if so, how many?
Yeah, there's 3 additional staff included in this budget that are new positions. And then another one for aquatics is kind of a reallocation of seasonal employees towards a full-time employee. Laura thought with the addition of this person, it would reduce seasonal costs.
Yeah, Tom, Ken Adams again. I think I recall seeing, I think just today, Bob Petrine had what I thought was a good comment or question right on the money on involving FTE. So I assume we're going to get to his questions later in the presentation.
Yes, and there,
Okay.
I believe we have a, let me check what we sent out. Yeah, we've got there's a list of FTEs, historical going back to 2010 later in the slide deck here.
Right, I think Bob's questions were part of the package, so I assume we'll get to those as well. One of which had to do with FTEs.
This is Laura. Are there any questions about the aquatics position? That was quite a change. Would you like me to talk about that for a second?
Please.
Okay, so as you all know, we had an aquatics program manager which vacated the position. And so whenever a full-time person leaves, we take a look and see what we really need And we had 2 staff members currently with the aquatics department that did a great job this summer. And we feel that they can take over a lot of the duties. So what that means, though, is that they do need additional support, hours of support. So by taking away that aquatics program manager, giving those duties, there's still a full-time position and items that need to be done in order to move that department forward. So once we moved that new position is a different grade. And there is a small savings once everything is all said and done within the aquatics department for that. So I think it's called a coordinator position. So it's a full-time support. And then in Larry's previous presentation last month, there did show that there were some seasonal dollars that would be eliminated and moved over as well to support this position. Any questions?
Thank you.
Laura, I believe that aquatics program manager, weren't they seasonal before? I thought
No,
that's what Hank was explaining that.
No, that was a full-time aquatics program manager position that was Willa, for those of you that
right.
remember.
Okay, so and then we went a year without Willa.
That was this year, yes.
Right.
And
so how did that go?
Very well, which is why we're recommending removing that aquatics program manager position and elevating the 2 people that really ran the show very well this year. But by taking away that aquatics program manager position, there are still duties that need to be done in order for them to take on. So it's a different grade. It's not an aquatics program manager grade. It's not a manager position at all.
But if we were successful in not having that position this year, what?
So we had some seasonals, if you will, that were
okay.
around and were able to fill those roles. So for continuity, to ensure that those people will not be here next year. They're going off, to college and applying for other jobs. And this actually kind of goes back to an old model that we had before, where we did have that position, a coordinator position that helped support those 2. But it's less money.
And the other comment I would make as well, Jennifer, on that is that in support of those 2 people who stepped up to run aquatics this year, you'll notice the forecast for overtime. That's because a lot of those, as Laura just called them, the seasonals, they stepped up and had to do a lot more work. And so what we're recommending is by taking away the program manager position and doing an aquatics coordinator, we also hope that we will greatly lower overtime moving forward as well. Certainly not to the extent that we have it this year.
But we're still increasing overtime for budget reasons for 2022.
It's because the number of pools are being increased, right? The number of operating pools.
Well, we are going to operate 1 more next year. Well, possibly even 2 more. We'll see, ultimately, than we did this year. Yes.
But that's why overtime is going up, even though we're moving some of the overtime to a position.
Well, if you look across the sheet here that's on the screen, you saw the FY19 actual overtime, 2021 forecast, and then the 21 budget. And so we're going up, $2,000. But compared to what we actually spent, our goal, my goal, is that overtime number actually goes down. It is as we've discussed this with fiscal many times, it's a very, very tough one and most of that comes from aquatics because there's a major crunch once winter clears and you've got to get all these pools open.
Yeah, and I think for consistency purposes, the slides previously were the 22 budget versus the 21 forecast. So I think that's where maybe there's some confusion because it is coming down by almost half from what's projected this year to what could be in the budget next year. So it's increasing 1900s, but showing those yellow cells, but it's really dropping by 84, 85,000. And Larry, there was another comment, I believe, that was made about merit being included. Is that within the salaries and wages line? Because I see here there's a one line item for merit allowance, but I don't think that was what you were referring to, correct?
That is correct. That's a merit allowance that is held, I believe that's held in the HR budget for special circumstances. But the merit, the 3% merit is in the salaries expense at the top of the sheet.
That's correct, Larry.
And then with that, like for everyone else's edification, I believe that merit was expected to come through for several years, and because of varying circumstances, and the biggest one being COVID, is that a lot of those were either removed or held flat or just weren't implemented, and that's what is being recommended in this, right? So can you explain a little bit more for those that might not have?
Sure. There was no merit for 2021, and what I've recommended here is a 3% merit in addition to implementing the second phase, the bulk of the second phase of the Archer report, which impacts about 46 staff and would move them up to the bottom of their pay ranges. And I think it's 83% of those people, after they get moved to the bottom of their pay range, make less than $60,000. So we're talking about line staff. And again, you heard me say at the last, well, many of you heard me say at the last meeting, I feel that those are two of the strongest things that we should do in this budget that I'd like to think are not, this is not my call, obviously, but I'd like to think they're non-negotiable. And let's talk about everything else.
So then when comparing the 22 budget with the 21 forecast, that's where I think previously on one of the previous slides, it was like closer to $1 million of change. I'm rounding here, obviously. This yellow cell is showing the 560, but presumably if we were consistent and showed the 22 budget with the 21 forecast, that number would be different. And so that's, I think, is what you're saying, is that takes up the majority of those impacts. It's not necessarily the 3 additional FTEs. Is that correct?
Well, it is, but the 3 FTEs are in there.
Right.
Yeah.
But the majority is what you were mentioning, the merit and the Archer adjustment.
Yeah, I think the total for those two is about 350,000. I'm just doing really quick addition. I don't have a memo open in front of me.
Okay.
So can you go to then because I had this exact question, Scott. And so I did a spreadsheet and sent it in and asked Tom if he could help explain the variances. And that's in the packet, Mike. It might be the next slide after this one. It's close to whatever page we're on now.
I'm not sure. Actually, it's further down.
It's further down.
Isn't it?
It's after the headcount change report.
Page 17.
Christina, can we move down to that? If you all don't mind jumping around, the deck a little bit.
As long as we come back to this. Thank you.
I think it's 17, page 17 of the packets. Okay, there's the,
I think it's the
thing,
next
but
thing.
the very next one is the one that Jennifer was referring to,
There
right?
you
Jennifer, this is the one you're referring to?
Yes. So this kind of explains the differences from a salary. I looked at just full-time salaries, not seasonal. And so you kind of see that part of the Archer adjustments were already put in, even though we didn't budget for them. And then we have some new positions. And my question to Tom is, it says merits a lot in the variances. What does that mean?
That means the difference between the two would be that 3% merit in their pool for that cost center.
So for next year's pool, that was the major variance in that line item, was that you already, but that the 22 budget is carrying the 3% in that pool.
Right, it was increased 3% to include that merit.
We want to go back to the prior sheet then? Or do you have any more questions on this? We can certainly touch on it later as well.
None for me.
Not hearing objections.
Larry, forgive me, but there, if memory serves me correctly, there were 12 people who were below their minimum salary, and then now there are 46 that are going to be raised to the minimum. What did I get that wrong? I kind of remember in previous discussions it was about $100,000 that in order to bring a certain number, and I think it was 12 people up to their minimum, and then you mentioned 46 to bring them to their minimum. Is that 46 to bring them to their median, or did I get that wrong?
I think it's to the minimum. Melissa, I think you're on. You want to jump on?
I am. I'm on. The 46 number is to the minimum of the pay bands. And Bob, I think you're speaking to, there was a smaller component of individuals that had been 5 years or more, and we were moving them. So it was a combination of their tenure, also their previous 3 years of appraisals for them to be eligible for the midpoint adjustment. So it's only left a couple people. We had some turnover in that group since we had run the projections. So that number's a lot smaller now on the midpoint.
Okay. So it's 12 that had been in their position for 5 years or more that needed to get to the midpoint with satisfactory job performance, correct? And then now
Yes.
there are 46 that were below the lower range of their salary band.
Correct. And
Okay.
the midpoint adjustments, I think we're down to just a couple people now versus 12. Just we had some turnover and change in that group.
Okay.
Tom, you want to, Christina, can you advance to the next slide, which I think is just another way of looking at this. We were trying to provide a fair amount of information for you all to study and consider. So
Yeah, the next page would be more an executive summary, which summarizes the above sheet. You have, a lot of the line items above would condense into that regular employees, the seasonal and overtime to come back to total salaries. Then the benefits were condensed, from the various categories above. The withholdings, training and development, and incidental labor come back to the other employee costs. And there again, you have the total outside cost consisting of professional and technical support and legal. And that comes back down to the total people cost. This was just an executive summary. This was originally what I was going to give, but Larry said, let's provide the first sheet to give the greater detail.
Larry, I have a couple of comments on the previous sheet, just not looking for answers. Is there a better way we can track overtime so we're not finding such a big jump? When we're budgeting, if we could be more realistic with the numbers, because they seem to be almost double from budget to forecast. Second is the legal services. This is in addition to Tony, correct?
Correct.
Again, glad to see we're almost 100,000 or 200 less than what we budgeted. Is there a way we can track these closer? Like, is there a reason why the variances are, six-figure amounts?
So the legal was because the majority is CW, which handles our delinquent accounts. And because of the data crash, the information that they needed had to be redeveloped. And we just now are to that point. So the 2020 delinquent accounts will be with the 2021 delinquent accounts. And that's why the budget for 22 is up higher than what the 21 forecast is. Plus that was reduced for 40,000 for the financial services position. If that position is not approved by the board, then that number needs to be bumped up 40,000.
So you see the financial services person taking over some of these that we've been,
Yes,
I guess, piecing out.
The position will be responsible for the collections. And with that position, I see that the need for CW and the actual delinquent accounts decreasing.
And then second, this is just for my curiosity, Larry, one of those, just an answer that helps Sarah. The tuition reimbursement, are you seeing this used by, at what grade of staff are we seeing this used by? Is it SLT? Are we seeing a lot of our younger, newer staff members taking advantage of it? And again, we have budgeted 10,000. This is one I would have been happy to hit the budget amount. Why are we at just 3,000?
Melissa, you want to touch on that, but because she tracks that directly. It's typically not SLT. Now there's professional development requirements, for Tom, Tony, and other Cam and others for their credentials. But the tuition reimbursement is typically for non-SLT.
That's correct, Larry. And we just didn't, I think people may have shied away from returning to school for whatever reason. They just didn't tap into it this particular year.
Thank you.
Was COVID a factor, Melissa?
I believe it was, Karen. Because we had some people that had shown interest, but then just took their foot back off the pedal. So I suspect the pandemic had a lot to do with it.
Okay, shall we move on to the next section, which hopefully, well, I'm going to let Chris talk. I think we go right into capital. So Chris, you want to just give a kind of a high level overview? I know we only included a couple of new slides, which I think were actually repeats from the prior information that was sent out. And we can field some questions as well.
Sure. Let me do this. 1 second.
Chris, do you want to share your own screen, or do you want me to look for the slides?
I can share my own screen because I made a couple additional like little details here. So I just basically took the presentation I gave you guys a few months ago and just kind of made the updates to it according to what we are now forecasting for it. So talking about the 10-year average, this is kind of where we are right now with our current year-over-year expenses and annual contribution requirements. And this kind of shows it graphically. So before, you might have recalled, there was a pretty of a sharp spike here in the expenses, and it kind of went up and down a little bit and then started to tail off. Now with a lot of adjustments both to the current upcoming 5 years as well as the 5 out years beyond that, and then even beyond that, there's been some updates and adjustments to try to help flatten and smooth this curve over time. And so you can see now where we have this 10-year average forecast, which is a nice smooth gradient. However, there is an adjustment from this year to next year. If you're assuming at 21,230 equivalent units, you're still talking about a $16 increase on the capital side for covering the expenses moving forward. But then it does sort of stabilize moving beyond that with $5 changes, slow increment increases year over year. Then there's another slight uptick in 25 and 26 as we gear up to getting into some of these other pool renovations like Ridge Heights that kind of come up in that additional 5-year look ahead. But keeping in mind though that we do another reserve study in 2024, so there is going to be potential for some future adjustments and refinement of this forecast when we get to that point. But we do think at least the current 5-year forecast is pretty solid. And so I can kind of jump to that slide here real quick. Here we go. So this overviews the next 2 years as well as the 3 out years beyond that for each basic project category division. So if you have any questions on this particular topic, since I know that was in the packet materials. Take that as a no. And then from the 5-year, major project forecast, like I've mentioned before, that we have moved out Tall Oaks and Newbridge from the original 5-year major project listing. We've moved that out from this listing, and we currently have remaining, Lake Throw renovation, the second half of that occurring in next year. Barton Hill Tennis, this includes the lighting just for the presentational purposes. Shadowwood Pool renovation starting the planning, design, engineering phase in 22 with the renovation in 23. The Glade Tennis renovation in 23. Newport Tennis was moved out a little bit from what it was before to kind of help move, Glade, which is a little bit more of a priority than Newport was in terms of its condition. So Newport is now in 2024. That cost was also adjusted up to account for the fact that it is being moved out so far in the schedule, and we had already had money set aside in the 2020 budget. Will then be released back into the triple RF count and used for however necessary by the board, but then would adjust that figure for 2024 to now be what it would need to be recontributed for, so that we were not holding on to money and deferred for a project that isn't going to happen for several years out. So instead of holding on deferred, we're just going to release it, and then we'll go back through the budgetary approval process when we get into the 24-25 budget cycle. Lake Ann Dam renovation was also in 2024 originally, because the technical review panel still has not really gotten much progress that we were aware of. We don't think they're going to actually get to any type of decision until 2025, when we can actually then perhaps execute some type of remediation to that dam, whatever it may be. That current sum is forecasting an approximate figure to armor the backside of Lake Ann Dam, which we believe is the most likely requirement that we would have to provide. But there's still a lot of unknowns there with that particular project. So it's going to be a while before we really know exactly what we'll have to do and how much. But because of the scope of that project, we think it's prudent to start preparing for it because there likely is going to be something. We don't know what it is. for sure, but there's likely to be something, and it's likely going to be expensive because you are talking about a dam, which is, one of our biggest, most expensive and complicated assets that we have. From just a size standpoint, you have Wheelie Avenue crashing over top of it. You have a lot of downstream structures to be concerned about. And anytime you work with a dam, there's a lot of red tape to go through because it is such a sensitive infrastructure of the association. Upland's tennis court renovation, that's been moved into it as well because we have done a geotech evaluation at that site. We just got the report back today to kind of go through the details, what we're looking at. But judging from initial investigations, we are going to need to do something to that site similar to what we just did at Hook Road. That is a similar thing we're seeing in a lot of these tennis facilities where over time they've had multiple overlays of asphalt. And we've now reached a point, kind of like some of our swimming pools, where we can no longer just keep layering over top of it. We now need to chip and strip off and kind of start over again to get back to a solid base to work off of. So that's, again, what we're looking at doing at Uplands. This does not include any kind of lighting at that facility. Now, if there is a desire to light that tennis court, that would be a CARF item that we could then consider down the road. Golf Course Island is pretty much exactly where it was originally, but it's now only one of the 2 renovations for pools in the next 5 years. That would start its engineering design plan in 2025 with its assumed construction in 26. And then immediately following after the construction of that one, we're looking at getting into Ridge Heights in its engineering design in 2026 and with its construction in 2027. So that sort of outlines all the major capital projects we're forecasting in the next 5 years.
Couple questions, Chris. Forgive me, you have been going to ask for I believe the same information you've already given. Your intent with the tennis courts is to basically rebuild the tennis courts rather than just coat them, right?
So yeah, rather than just laying another layer of gravel and asphalt on top, we actually need to do a full depth reclamation, which is to grind up the sub base, stabilize it, and then build the court back on top of that. And we do that because it's more cost effective than trying to excavate and remove all of that accumulated material, which could be hundreds and hundreds of yards, if not thousands of yards of material to then transport out and dispose of somewhere. This method actually recycles the existing material, which is environmentally friendly. It's more cost effective. It's faster, and also doesn't require as many oversights and regulations from the county because we're not actually disturbing any of the soil since we're working on top of it. So that's also the benefit of doing it through this process.
I haven't gotten the question yet, but I'm sure I'm going to get it. Is Lake Newport Tennis is substantially greater, the renovation is substantially greater because of lights? Is that?
It's also much bigger. You're talking about six courts versus your typical 4-court facility. So it's larger than that scale. It's also got a lot of lights. It also has a retaining wall running right through one section of it. And it also encompasses some other features that are on that site, such as the terraced viewing area, which has multiple retaining walls on it. There's a kind of a pergola pagoda thing. There's also a bathroom on that site. So there's many elements there that may kind of get impacted or need to be addressed as part of all this work. So that's why the cost is substantial, but you are talking about it's our largest tennis facility. So it's going to incur the greatest expense to do renovations on.
Okay. And as far as, this is really not a budgetary, where are we with Lake Newport, or excuse me, Lake Thoreau renovation? I know we talked, you gave an update in September at the board meeting. Have we proceeded any further with that, with contracting?
A draft has been written, but we are still going through a best and final offer scenario with the finalists. So as soon as I get that detail back, that will then drive the final direction that will then submit an offer. But we're still working through that. We are still on track, I hope, to have a contract before you guys at the October regular board meeting, to then be able to progress into the construction, in November, December. and then be ready for opening in time for the 2023 swim season.
One last question, as it relates to the dam. When you say you're going to have to rebuild the backside, is that the side towards the gully or the side towards the lake of the dam?
So I actually have an image up too far. So this below image right here is an example of armoring a dam. So what they do is they lay down an interlocking block. It kind of reminds me of that, that interlocking tile you might use on a backsplash. It's like that, but on a huge scale. And so what it does is it stabilizes the downstream side of the dam in the event of an overtopping. So when the water, should it rise above the capacity of the dam, go over top of Wheelie Avenue and start actually flowing on the backside. What could happen if the dam isn't armored is that it could start eroding and actually channeling the backside of it, which could then trigger a dam failure. By armoring it, it actually prevents that, or at least helps prevent that from happening, the channeling, and then allows the water to then continue on its path downstream. And because this dam, and I don't believe any other dams that we have, has an emergency spillway, so it doesn't really have a real method of diverting that water around it or through it in the event of an overtopping like that. If it was a 100+ year storm that we may have, Larry's the dam guy. I don't, he knows a lot more about it than I do, but that's kind of my general understanding of that, requirement that we'd be looking to do.
Thank you.
You're learning well, Chris.
Thanks.
Chris, I have a question. Chris?
Yep.
I have a question. You've been discussing major projects, but I took some time to study the capital improvements plan that you had, and so for all of the triple RF expenditures foreseen for the next number of years, and am I correct? Was I correct in concluding that for all triple RF expenses between 2022 and 2031, we're looking at something over 40 million?
I don't know that number off the top of my head, but it doesn't sound off. You're talking about a fair number of major projects, and you still have our day-to-day stuff occurring over that period. I can do a quick look up here just to confirm that.
So I believe that's what you said at your presentation back in August. The figures you showed us then, I added them all up. And then also, I thought I understood that for the next number of years, so from 2032 to 2048, we're actually looking at an additional more than 80 million. Is that correct too? Did I understand that correctly?
So just checking back here, just on the triple RF, you're looking at $34,560,000 between 22 and 2031. And then from 2032, and where'd you have it cut off at?
2048 is where I saw your figures in
2048 is 85,897,000. So almost 86 million.
Okay. All right. So I was in the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned this just so that we have some sense that as we focus on the major projects, there are other projects too that we're going to have to figure out how to fund. Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Chris, I have a question, and I apologize because I know that you went over this at the September board meeting, and I just plumb ran out of time to go review it today, but the part of the Hook Road renovation that was recommended by the working group that didn't get in the initial phase budgeting, the bathroom, etc. Where are we on that?
Talking about the elements here. So the bathroom pavilion,
Yes.
the interconnected pathway network, so that allows you to get access from
Yeah, I
all
see the
different sides
pathway
and pieces.
network is on there, yeah.
So yeah, those are currently, I think the bathroom was in, shoot, I have to pull that up real quick.
So the interior pathway network, 150,000 in 2023 is that, right?
So that, yeah, that covers, I think, a portion of all of this. Now we are looking at trying to cost, value engineer the design of some of these pathways to make it perhaps, not within the VDOT right of way, which then makes things a lot cheaper and easier for us without having to deal with storm drainage and things of that nature. So we're going to work with Kimley Horn on seeing if we can try to make that work. But we believe, that 150,000 will then, allow us to get a lot of this network implemented. I don't know if it'll necessarily get all of it, but we really don't know for sure until we get through the, site plan process and get this number out for plans out for bid. And the bathroom, like I said, is going to be out in 2025, I believe.
Okay.
And that would then be encompassed as part of the, site plan development. And that's what we kind of depict here in this image of what it could potentially look at. It's like a combination bathroom pavilion.
Great. Thank you. I apologize for making you go through that again, but
No problem.
I'm old.
Karen, I had the exact same thing on my sheet. So,
Okay.
because I was like, what's going on with Hook Road? And Chris, for the total that we've invested in Hook Road, can you, like the amount that we've already done, and then we're looking at, it looks like close to 700,000 estimated to get it finished. Does that?
So
our whole project, like our whole Hook Road master project, is it?
So if you included the tennis work that we just completed, and I'll have to kind of factor in the ball field. So I think in general, you're looking at encompassing all of it was around, I think it's about maybe 1.5 million total for all the different elements between the tennis, the ball fields, the pathways, the bathrooms. Now that doesn't necessarily probably include the roadway enhancements, which we still don't really have confirmation on, who may be inevitably performing that work, either us or FCDOT or VDOT, or maybe it's a collaboration amongst everybody. But that's, I think, just rough number off the top of my head. I think that's probably what you're going to land on.
So we're kind of like halfway through the project then, or a little bit more than halfway through.
In terms of the financial budgetary complete, I would say maybe we're about halfway. In terms of physical complete, we're not halfway yet. We haven't even gotten to the ball fields and things of that nature, just the tennis court.
Oh, that's right. The ball field. I forgot. Okay, thanks.
As I recall, Chris, in September, you were going to go to the county for a permit, so it would expedite any further development or renovation, I should say.
Correct. So that
is, in terms of timing of, since it's come up 3 times in our listening sessions, moving the backstop for the ball field at the corner of Hook Road and Fairway. Can that be separated out, or is that best done consistent with the other renovation?
From a project management standpoint, in my opinion, it would make more sense to tackle these like items all at one time rather than piecing it up. Now, you could, in theory, do just this one field and not touch the other one at all, and probably squeak just under that 2,500 square foot impact area, because you have to talk about, you have the connecting pathway to get from the sidewalk to the backstops. You have all this concrete around the side of it, and then another connecting piece over there with a small section of pathway to connect its side over as well. And you're also dealing with VDOT, potentially on this corner, which complicates things if you're trying to do that without having some kind of oversight from them. Now, if you were to do that now and then, wait for everything later, without necessarily get a permit, yes, you might be able to do that. But honestly, and from my experience working with the county, with other engineers, you kind of go based upon what you on doing a project from the basis of intent. What do you intend to do at that site? Now, it's one thing to do a project and it's, just under that 2,500 square feet. And you're like, okay, perfect. But then after you do that project, you decide, you know what, there's something else on that site I want to do that I didn't really think about beforehand. And now I want to do it. And now it may breach that 2,500 square feet. Now, whether or not you need to then file a permit is kind of a gray area that you could know about. And maybe, maybe it's probably okay because you didn't intend to do any work beyond what you initially started. Now, in our case, we intend to do something a lot more than just that ball field. We tend to do that field, the field next to it, the pathways, the bathrooms, all these other elements. And so when you look at it from that standpoint of what do you intend to do, we're going to breach 2,500 square feet. And so from that, you should go through the process as required by the county. It is, in good faith, in my opinion, to do it that way. I've spoken with engineers. They agree with me on that standpoint, where if you're going to intend to do something more than just that 2,500 square feet, you should go through the proper procedures.
Okay, thanks.
What's the timing difference? So say we just took the backstop and we just did it separately. What are we talking about? Is it, do they get the ball field 6 months before, a year before, 5 years before?
There's strategies we could take to determine exactly how far we want to go with the site plan at this stage, because we do have the bathroom pavilion so far out. We could just say, proposed future bathroom in the site plan, which then doesn't necessarily go through as many, undulations with the county. If we just say, this is something we're earmarking, we haven't, gotten any specifics on this just yet, but it is something we want to then put on the radar to be done. And this is a conversation that we're having with Kimley Horn on what we can do to expedite this process, but still do it in a way that follows, all the rules and regs and, the intent concept. And, that's what we're working on right now. So in terms of an exact time frame, if we just did that one field right now, we could probably move on it pretty quick. There's not going to require anything beyond just procuring contractors, materials, and executing the work, getting DRB approval, which we haven't done yet. But that's all we could do. And then beyond that, we'd have to still go through the process of the other ones, because if you do both ball fields, which in my mind makes sense to do those as a package, both fields get addressed same time, you're breached 2,500 square feet. So you can only ever do one of them right now without having to go through some kind of county procedure.
Right. But the ball field, the plan or your goal to get the ball fields done is when? Or your hope?
My hope would be we could potentially, if we get moving on this process with the county right now, we might have opportunity to get it going by the very hopeful end of next year. More realistically, it might not be until the spring or summer of 2023, I guess it would be. So it would be a period of time. It does take time to go through a plan with the county, but we are evaluating, methods that we could try to expedite the process, but still follow it.
Can we have an update on what Kimley Horn says about the backstop and doing it separately the next time you give a capital projects update? Which I assume is next month.
Well, are you speaking from what specifically? So we have spoken about this with them.
Can we get from Kimley Horn the possibility of doing just that one backstop?
In terms of disturbed area limits?
Yes.
It's under.
Without disturbing more than the 2,500 square feet.
It's barely under.
Okay. Okay, so we already have that answer. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind too, Matt, Jennifer, is that, with the concrete work, if you go in and do one field now, you're not going to get the economies of scale
right
in the bidding process of, hey, you got a contractor coming in and do, hey, I'm going to do some sidewalk. I'm going to do 2 fields, etc. So that's the other, downside, I guess, of breaking it up.
Yeah, I totally understand from a project perspective that it makes sense to do it together. It's when are the kids going to have, both versus just one? And is that substantially different? I think that's just something that we need to consider from a community perspective. But we can digress or move on because it doesn't directly affect the budget.
Aren't they? Both fields are available right now, aren't they?
Yep.
So both fields are operational.
We were hearing from members that there were safety concerns on the listening sessions. That's why it's come up, and that's why we've been asking.
Yeah, there was lots of deep discussions by the working group that spent a lot of time on this, and that's where the plan came from. And so it's not like something's offline right now. So if you really want to save money, don't do anything.
I don't think it was about saving money. I think it was about safety. And I don't know if they've degraded more. I'll be honest, I haven't been over to the field, but it just came up during 2 different listening sessions. And so I thought it was best for the board to inquire.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Chris regarding at this point? Okay, if not, we can move on. I don't have any specific presentation materials on the operating budget. I know that different board members have different ideas and different questions, and so I guess the most appropriate thing would be to turn this over to Karen and you all to ask questions and discuss amongst yourselves with the members of the fiscal committee here about what your priorities are. You know, what Tom and I and the rest of the staff hope we get out of this is, as we move into developing a draft 2, what specifically do you want in and what specifically do you not want in? And to the extent that we can leave this meeting, hopefully before 1 in-the-morning, if you know, some of those specific ideas, I think that would be great.
Okay.
So over to you, President Anton.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I know, Jennifer, you submitted many things earlier today. I don't know if you're expecting that we'll go through every one of them, but maybe you or if somebody wants to start with something that is a priority in their mind.
Mine were all over the place, but I know that some of mine are shared by other board members, and I'm happy to let them make those requests. So I'm happy to wait.
Okay. I will, hold on just a second so I can get everybody on my screen here.
Dave has his hand up.
Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. I might have missed something so headcount additions for the 22 budget. I thought in our meeting last month there were 4 additions, and I heard tonight there are 3.
Yeah, can we go actually?
Do you want to go back to that report, Larry?
Yeah, there's a sheet.
The headcount change report.
Packet. But towards the back, that's got it's a headcount report.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't have the page number. Oh, there you go. So here's what we've got. This is the layout.
So I think in the presentation to us, there was a 4th IT position in the first draft.
The applications analyst.
And I guess the question then would be, if it's not in now, have we taken the dollars out? Because the dollars haven't come down any.
Right, yeah, I think this should have the applications analyst in there. That is a good catch, Dave. But those dollars are in.
So the dollars are in, it was just left off this.
Off the bottom of that table.
Okay.
Larry, just clarifying, it's Melissa, just clarifying that we did have an open IT headcount this year that we didn't fill, so that's why it's not an actual addition.
That's true.
Then it wouldn't be incremental dollars next year vis-a-vis the budget.
Well, I think that's why there was that confusion potentially between the 21 forecast, the 21 budget, and actually what we're doing for the 22 budget. Because there was like, if you looked at that one sheet that I was mentioning that was highlighted in yellow, there was only like 550K of incremental from one budget to the next. But when you actually looked at the forecast for 21 compared to the budget for 22, it was closer to $1 million. So I think that's where that discrepancy is being picked up.
Let me make a note here. Well, I know that initially in Clara's initial draft, she wanted 2 positions, and we only added 1 position in.
I think this might also speak to, we had 105 in some fiscal meetings reports from Tom. And so if Melissa is saying there was an IT position in, then we were actually at 106 and that was her count. Maybe that's the head count discrepancy and we were actually at 106 for 2021.
Well, I can assure you we are going to rectify this before our next meeting.
Okay. Anything else to discuss then on this sheet? And Larry, you'll get that clarified?
We absolutely.
Okay.
This is Laura. I'm happy to talk about the registrar position or guards. I know that questions have come up about that, if anyone has any.
Now, there was a proposal, but it wasn't in the first draft, to spend like $20,000+ to reimburse lifeguards for becoming certified. Is that in or is that out?
Out.
Okay.
It was 22,000 and change from what I remember.
So Laura, this +1 recreational services is the registrar?
Yes.
Okay.
Want me to give a little background on that? The reason for the ask?
Sure.
Okay, so some of you may know that when RecTrack was implemented, there was a core team of staff that represented various departments that would have an impact on IT member services, recreation, CSF, and then admin. The intent of the project was to have this core group of employees work to implement the system, then IT would take the reins and manage the project from there. Working with the core team through various means on cross-training efficiencies and keeping staff up to speed on what the new benefits would be from that program, work to find efficiencies, which ultimately benefit the end user, the members. So 4 of those people are no longer with the association, which represented the IT and member services teams. The 3 others remain, but their program and service staff were really speaking to how this application applies in the specific program or service area. And as you all know, the IT department has seen turnover in the last 5 years, and it still remains unsettled. This led to a need for staff member it just presented itself to say we need a lead, or someone who can really focus on Vermont system, resolve issues quickly that are a step above the frontline staff for customers and staff. The other issues, there's no overall management of the program for training efficiencies across the organization. So we have individual program managers reaching out to the Vermont systems, working on their sole issue, and then move on. So what we did is, okay, here's a problem. What are some other questions that we needed to ask? How often and the amount of time our program and service staff spent with Vermont systems that they couldn't assist members on? How often did they reach out to a manager who we designated as a kind of that point person, but that person has been pulled away from their job duties? How many unhappy or frustrated customers? And then what is not being developed? Training, efficiencies to get the job done. And then all of that leads to customer service. Point of sale, credit card sales on site, reports and statistics for our staff to make informed decisions about programs. And a lot of the questions you all ask, we can't pull. We know that the information lives there, but we don't have that lead to be able to say, this is where that comes from. Then we also look to other agencies to find out what they use. And the larger agencies do have lead or head registrars, lead registrars, or pick a title. But that's the reason for the ask.
So can that be, so the lack of IT resources is kind of forcing work over into your organization, right?
Correct.
So now, if the other organizations are experiencing the same thing, we don't want everyone hiring a registrar. Maybe we need the IT resource and not this resource. Just a thought.
Yeah, that was something that we had discussed before too. The IT side was more application management, and this one does interact with customers and does do training with staff. So it's more of the member facing and staff training versus the application person who is in charge of the agreements and ensuring that the applications are working. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Did that answer your question, Dave?
Well,
It's an answer.
I don't know if it does. I mean, if we're missing IT resources that used to do this, and it needs to be done for all of RA, not just recreation, maybe we should have somebody there and not make every part of the organization hire someone to do it. I guess we've never had this before within the recreation department, right? It's been handled elsewhere.
So
I don't have an answer. I defer to Laura. I just, I worry that because we're not hiring or don't have resources in one place, that we're then going to ask the other SLT members to staff up to protect their groups.
So I'm speaking about the position because it impacts our team the most, but this position certainly doesn't necessarily live within the recreation department. It could fall under IT. It's just it impacts the recreation team.
And the only other thought is it's seasonal. I mean, are we talking about a May to September job?
No, this is a full-time position. And then in the previous, but this is a conversion of a seasonal position with a camp registrar to use some of those dollars to help offset this position, because this position would help not just camps, but it helps the whole team, which operates 12 months of the year, not just seasonally.
So Laura, could you explain that a little bit more? There is currently someone dedicated to a dedicated camp registrar?
We have a dedicated camp registrar to handle that sort of large influx during the camp season for that crunch. So this person would take on that role as well as.
This person would eliminate the need for that seasonal person?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions about the headcount change?
I'm sorry, I don't want to, I misunderstood that. The camp registrar would
Mm-hmm.
The
I'm confused.
dollars that we use to pay the camp registrar
Yep.
would be, that position would be eliminated, and this new position would take over not just camps, but also be the lead registrar for the organization.
Okay, so it wouldn't be incremental costs then, because we've got those dollars for the camp registrar already in.
Correct.
So it's not additional headcount. Excuse me, it's not additional dollars, but I think the dollars are in the budget.
It is additional dollars. The camp registrar is a seasonal position right now because camps don't operate year round.
So we need to convert from seasonal to full.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
So Laura, is this more a customer interface position rather than a primarily tech position?
Correct.
So talk a little bit more about that. They help people negotiate their interaction with
Sure.
the automated system. Is that correct?
Yes. So if our current frontline staff, so I'll give an example with tennis. Our tennis program coordinator will help people with basic transactions if needed over the phone or via email, and is able to help process, similar to member services, with day-to-day operations and transactions. However, if a scenario comes up that there's something wrong with the account, it's a more complicated transfer, or there are other issues where we need to contact Vermont Systems to help that member address their account or help that staff member process that odd or that issue. That's where this person would come in. And also then taking, let's say that there is a solution that is met that may be a good fit for not only that one tennis department, but also for the other program managers for their operations. That training is then given to them so that we're all on the same page, as opposed to working one off on just your own issue and not really looking holistically at, okay, look, here's an issue with transfers, or here's an issue with refunds. We can mainstream this to make it easier for the staff, easier for the customer to get what they need, and then it is more efficient for the staff. They have a new solution to an issue that they've had.
Karen?
Yes, Jennifer. Sorry.
I believe, and this is, I feel like I'm hearing the same thing that I heard at the fiscal meeting, which was we have IT system issues and it's bothering us from an efficiency standpoint internally. And it is causing our members grief to interact or do business with us. And I really, truly believe that what we do for the membership, even in an online environment, should be able to, for the most part, be taken care of by our IT systems, and have member services take care of 95, 97% of these transactions. And it hurts me to hear that staff are struggling with basic system work. But I really believe and hope that our IT committee and our IT structure gets settled, because I don't believe that hiring positions to handle our vendors is the right solution. And I think that we should be able to have systems so that the member suite system that takes financial transactions also has some insight into WebTrack, or, it is possible. It is done in so many organizations, and it really hurt me that we are trying to solve IT issues with people, because they'll just struggle working with these IT vendors trying to make things better internally. And I'd rather see us go down the road of working on our IT solutions and creating those efficiencies. So there's just generally less pain points within the organization and also with our members.
Anybody else have a comment on that particular piece?
I'm sorry, what, I missed that.
Oh, I just asked if anybody else had a comment on that particular piece.
No, I agree. And I can only speak as an informed outsider. I'm not part of the staff. So I agree with Jennifer that our solutions tend to be driven off what we've done in the past by adding more staff. And I think we owe it to ourselves going now and into the future about looking to alternatives like substituting technology for manual processes. We don't do anything, none of our transactions are that complicated that we should have these kinds of problems, that they should have this much human interaction. It should be done online. And I think, if we add, it is the issue that I have with adding full-time staff in positions that, we have an allegiance to somebody that we hire. And I think we're getting to the point now where we really need to run the organization much leaner than it's ever been run before. And that includes looking at all of our processes to see what we can do to hold the line on staff expenses, since they represent 70% of our operating budget. And we, in all reality, we haven't added a service. We've done more of the same for the past 15 or 20 years. We still have the same number of pools. We still have the same number of tennis courts. And yet, over the last, 7 or 8 years, we've increased staff significantly. Maybe we were understaffed before. I'm just looking at it as an informed outsider, saying that we've increased staff when I think we should have been looking at changing processes. And it gets expensive. People are expensive. I'll leave it at that.
Yes, Larry, did you want to say something?
Sure, yeah. So as most of you have heard me say, we're about to take an IT maturity assessment that I think will, and this is all very good information. I think for now, I will go for wherever draft 2 ends up. I will remove the registrar position. And I think we'll, take your comments, Bob and Jennifer, with respect to that, because it is to some degree an applications issue, and hopefully our IT piece can help address that. So just to help you move along, because there's a lot of other discussion that needs to take place.
Yes.
Sure. I'll make one other comment. Is if we had a staff that cost us $100,000 and we saved $40,000 as a result of adding them, that's not a good payoff.
Unfortunately, we're in the place we're in with our IT. Hopefully we'll have an IT director soon, and so the committee can start going and we can maybe proceed with getting our website redone, which I think will make a lot of these processes easier and a lot more user-friendly. So, okay, do we want to talk then about, since we're on the headcount page, any discussion necessary on the addition of a capital projects manager. Yes, Bob.
I just wanted to remind the board that the fiscal committee unanimously recommended that this position be added to this coming year's budget.
Okay. Does anybody have any objections to it being in there? Okay, that one stays. And the finance manager.
I had requested that position. It's
Yes.
more of a member facing with billings and collections, taking on the responsibility of researching payment
Yes, to
history.
take that off of you and Dave, I know.
Yeah. Every time things go to member services, and if it's not something they can handle, it just gets escalated up to
Yeah.
Dave and myself. That person would also be responsible for maintaining member suite and handling all the duties as far as the resolution dictates.
Any discussion on this? Does anybody have any objections to that being in there?
I'd like to make a motion to remove $50,000 from the finance salary budget.
Is there a second so we can discuss?
I'll second.
I'd like to.
Jennifer, do you want to speak to what your reasoning is behind that?
I'd like to see us spend the money to help the board and the fiscal committee have a more strategic direction on financial matters and get more advice and counsel. And I'd like to be able to use the money that way.
Any other discussion?
Doesn't mean that it would not potentially create the ability to do what Tom is asking. I think that we just need to think creatively in order to get ourselves there.
Yes, Larry.
Just a clarification, was it to add or remove? I honestly, you said the motion, Jennifer.
Remove, you asked for 102,000 and I'm asking to reduce that 102,000 that is in draft 1 to 52,000.
I would not be in favor of that motion. I think that's one department that desperately needs as much help as we can give them so that our Tom and Dave can do what we want them to do. And right now, they're so bogged down. So I hate to take any money away from that line.
Isn't part of the time that they're spending as a result of the kludgy accounting system that is now being mothballed. Essentially, we're going to have a better accounting system that should be able to work better. You won't spend as much time doing the manual adjustments that, or shouldn't be doing the manual adjustments. And the reporting capabilities, I understand, are substantially superior to what we have now, which are pretty much nil. And I think Jennifer points out, this is spending the money differently at this moment in time. And we could, and I'll go back to looking at things more creatively, looking at things more systematically to create procedures perhaps automated procedures that could get us to the result that we want and not impose the same amount of manual adjustments and time that it would take to do the jobs that they're now doing.
Anybody, Scott, anybody from fiscal want to weigh in on this one? Dave?
Any chance that something like a year-round part-time person working 25 hours a week can lend? There are probably many, many people out there who can't work full-time, but have tremendous college backgrounds and degrees that would probably love to have a job like this. Just a thought, you could do it for not a lot of money, and I bet you'd get a lot of candidates, but Tom would know better whether that kind of thing would fit or not.
Want to comment on that, Tom?
I'm just not sure what, what you're requiring that I can't provide. I mean, anything that anybody's ever asked, I've always produced reports.
Well, don't get me wrong, I'm not asking you to hire somebody. I was responding to, rather than having a full-time person, would a permanent part-time be of the kind of value that could assist you instead of the full-time $100,000 a head person?
Oh, for the financial services.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, any help that we could get would immensely help us, that's for sure.
So Dave, what you're suggesting is instead of a full-time financial services person that has, I think is currently in the budget, is to make that a part-time person, and that would coincide with Jennifer's wanting to reduce that line? Do I have that right? Yes, Bob.
What I'm thinking of is doing a needs assessment to figure out what best works. And if that means hiring a part-time person, so be it. If it can be handled via technology, great, even better. But right. Taking the time to think about what you're really asking for and trying to do it in the most efficient way. And it may not be, again, I'm basing this as an outsider looking in. I don't know if the problem, if the issues are where we have overwhelming expectations of our staff, or if things could be done differently and become more efficient. I just don't know.
Well, I would look to the CEO and the department head for that.
So what I think I've heard
to see what the needs are.
Yeah. What I think I've heard from multiple members of the staff is that they need more assistance, whether it's IT or if it's more bodies. And just what I have seen for various businesses in this area is that, you can add a software and make it better and improve efficiencies. The cost to get to where that level is takes some time because there's usually the implementation costs, the training costs. So there's downtime, that opportunity cost essentially should be considered. And I'm not sure if we're really hearing that. So again, it's tough to say exactly, how that impacts the budget going forward, but thinking that you're going to be able to find a technology that's better than the one you have now, that will be cheaper than the one you have now, and will have zero implementation costs is just not realistic. So yeah, sure, maybe 18 months from now, there's a technology in place to get there, but the cost for that budget to implement it, if that's what the direction the board wants to go, at least having those bodies in there as the cost for now that's probably the realistic landing spot, because if you want Tom to be giving the reporting and Larry to keep the, the lights on, so to speak, and reporting to you all, there needs to be somebody else working with the IT and integrating whatever they need specifically, because as any good consultant can tell you, it's depends on the facts and circumstances and how each system is supposed to operate with the various individuals. And I'm not a technical IT person at all, but it always seems like they can find various ways to make that cost run up. And I think we're in this spot now just because historically it's always been, let's cut wherever we can so IT gets cut. But if the thought is you're bringing in an IT person to help solve these problems, generally speaking, it's the inverse, right? It's the IT person clamoring for more money with funds because there's so many different issues that are popping up. I mean, think about just, how much security issues that I've never talked about from a fiscal perspective. And I don't know what that looks like, but there's a lot of data out there that somebody could hack into. Or these meetings have been hacked before. There is a bigger issue here. I'm not sure it gets solved tonight, but.
Yes, John. John?
I'm unclear and would appreciate Larry and Tom's perspective on this. Exactly who this person's customer, so this financial manager that Thomas or Larry and Tom have proposed, who are their customer? Who is this person's customer? Is it primarily external customers or internal customers inside RA? And how much of this person's duties and workload would be dealing with IT problems, and how much of it would be customer service? I'm not clear on that fundamental issue.
Go ahead, Tom, if you want to take the first crack.
Sure. The majority of the time spent would be dealing with members of Reston Association, researching payment history, handling members' suites itself, making sure that when we run reports, they tie out, that whenever we need to put in charges for late fees, interest, that it's applying to all the accounts that are delinquent or the accounts that are in an installment plan or payment plan. And a lot of it, like I was saying, member services can handle when a member calls in just to make a straight payment. But when there's a problem with the account, it always gets escalated up to David Honeywell or myself. Majority of the time, David handles it. But then, each time we handle a phone call, it takes, half an hour of our time just to go to research, to, figure out where the account is, and then get back to the member. So the majority of the time, to answer your question, would be, member facing with RA members.
And Tom, can you estimate from your and David's workload on this direct member services, this payment history, the account problems, about how many hours, what part of this person's day or week would be spent in doing this member service?
I know Dave Honeywell probably spends half his day, every day of the week, dealing with problems that get escalated, and then what he can't handle ends up in my hands. And I usually spend an hour a day answering questions from the member or researching their account to see what went wrong, trying to get the information from the member to make sure we applied payments correctly. Even updating addresses, that we catch the overflow within member suite. and correcting it, if an owner had sold a residence that didn't get a transfer fee recorded and a new owner updated within membership.
The other thing I will add to what Tom has said, and he noted earlier that we've removed $40,000 in legal fees with this position being in, because we want to take a much more proactive approach in reaching out to members who are delinquent. Right now we are in a basically reaction mode. And we want this person to lead the charge in contacting delinquent account holders, being proactive about, helping them, and whether that's getting them on an installment plan or something like that. But there's a proactive piece of this as well.
There's research there as well. When we mail out invoices, 200, 300, 400 pieces of mail come back to us with an improper address. So each one of those, we need to try to research Fairfax County to see if there's a new owner or a new address that's been provided. A lot of times we just use the property address itself, and that's not where the invoice should have been mailed to. And we don't find that out until the mail comes back to us. And that takes a little bit of time right there, researching where the address should have been.
So Jennifer, I'm clear in my mind, the purpose of your motion to remove the $50,000 is because in your opinion, we don't need the financial services hire? Is that, do those go hand in hand, or am I misunderstanding something?
I think that the board has talked about governing and managing several times, and I'm attempting to stay out of the management realm and at the higher level. So my preference is to give Larry an additional $50,000 in his finance team, and have Larry or the next CEO, whoever inherits this, to figure out how to best position the finance team. Because when I hear things like Tom saying, my team gets mail back and I'm taking those addresses and trying to look up new things, it makes me, as a board member, which I shouldn't be doing, saying, why are we paying high valued finance people to look up addresses for residents? But, we've talked about trying to stay at the higher level. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so you just said to give Larry 50,000, but your motion is to remove 50,000, yes?
Because Larry put in 102. So there's 102 in draft one. So I'm removing 50,000 of that. So in essence, that you're still getting an additional 50,000 over 2021's budget.
Okay. Well, if there's no more discussion.
Aaron has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
Why 50? What's your reason, Jennifer?
Part of what I do is human resources in my personal job. So I'm taking a look at the size of the organization and the complexity of the organization and the number of staff that we have in the finance team, and making a judgment there based on knowledge from outside of the organization.
So why
salary surveys and, those types of things.
So why 50 and why not 102?
Because I think that we're funding the finance team at about the right level, and adding more, I'm hearing that they feel like they need more, and I think that we're already financing it at the right level. So to me, I'm having what they asked.
Anybody else before we call the question? Okay, Jennifer, do you want to repeat your motion?
Motion to reduce the finance salary and benefits line by 50,000 in draft 2 of the 22-23 budget.
Okay, and we had a second.
I seconded.
Yep, you had seconded. So all those in favor? One, two, three, 4 ayes. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that motion fails. Okay,
Madam President,
yes, Tim.
would this be an appropriate time to talk briefly about the senior environmental official position at the director level?
I think it would. We're doing operational expenses, so.
This should be a very short conversation. The board has already approved this. I understand, Brother Larry, that you are not thrilled with this initiative, but the board has approved it. So can we get it into the next draft budget?
Certainly.
Thank you, sir.
Hey. What else would people like to discuss about the operational expenses? Larry, are there specific decisions you would like from us tonight that I mean, I know there are, but I mean, what would you especially want us to give you some direction on for draft 2?
Well, I sent out a list of those items that were, in and out. So we've talked about a couple of those.
Right.
Let me pull this up on my screen. That's not it. Okay, done. So for instance, the things that I have in there currently that again I think are important is the additional and whether or not you want me to leave it in at this point would be the additional seasonal staff dollars for watersheds, natural areas, pathways, and rec areas. The guard funding is in there starting at $15 per hour. And I had a conversation with Jennifer earlier, that I guess one of the questions that I might ask Laura, if she can just touch on it real quick, what our base salary is on guards right now. And we may have some flexibility to phase an increase over 2 years. I think we want to be over our immediate competitors, Park Authority, RCC, the Y, et cetera, in terms of base, our starting guard cost. So maybe it doesn't need to be 15, maybe that's 1350, 14. But Laura, can you chime in on that?
Sure. So as Larry mentioned, it's what's in this current draft is starting the guards at 15. We have different scenarios from 1250 all the way up to 15. And if you're thinking of a 2-year step, I might recommend starting at 1350 for 2022 and then moving to 15 or some step in between again for the 2023. The budget that is currently in the guard category is $544,000. So by moving to $15 an hour, by moving to 1350, that's $505,000. So that is approximately 40,000 less. And I can also comment on, some of the competitors range for starting. If I'm looking at our immediate competitors that hire guards, Loudoun County is between 13 and 18. Nova Parks is 13. Fairfax County Park Authority 13 to 18. Reston Community Center 11 to 18. Town of Herndon 15. The Y 13 25. And then please don't forget that it's not just lifeguard positions that we are competing against. Target 15, Chick-fil-A 12, Chipotle 13 to 14.50. So we do take a look at those other agencies that we also hear our staff say, I want to come back, but the required certification is a financial challenge and I can make more at Target. So we looked at not just those lifeguard direct competition, and I'll stop talking for questions.
And we're at 11 now, is that right?
Correct. We are at 11, and then we also have attendant positions, which are people that just take and scan the cards and greet people as they come in there at 9:50. So we have to bring not only the attendants up, but also the lifeguards up.
Yes, Bob.
I'm for tiering starting at 13.50 and going to 15, plus picking up the certifications, because Larry and I and Tom have talked about it, and considering the typical term of is like 10 weeks, the amount of money that you spend to get certified is a significant deduction from what you make. And if we can, they will have more money in their pocket even if we're not going to 15 than they would have otherwise. So I would strongly suggest the board consider spending the 22,000 and change to get the lifeguard certified.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if this is a conflict of interest or not. I don't think it is, but my son went through the certification, had to pay for it, and then he would have had to pay for his recertification at all as well. And it would take a lot of hours to make that back up. So I think we'd do well. It'd be a nice token, if nothing else, to attract more lifeguards.
The 20,000 is inclusive of full brand new classes as well as some of those recertifications.
Great.
That's inclusive of both.
Thanks for disclosing, Mike.
Sure.
Yes, Aaron.
I'll second Mike's comment. I have a child who is taking a job at Herndon Community Center rather than Reston Association because of better pay and certifications being included.
Yeah, it's a problem. I know I may have mentioned this at meetings before, but I know one of the reasons that Southgate Community Center is so understaffed is this very thing. And I don't know if this has changed, but not too long ago, they were not able to open on Saturdays because they just didn't have the staff. And it's pretty sad when a community center can't be open on a Saturday. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's just, because other places, like Laura said, Target and Walmart are paying more. And I mean, DC minimum wage has been 15 for 2 or 3 years at least. Anyway, yes, Dave.
I was shocked to hear we were $11. I thought 2 years ago we increased it to 13. So yeah, if we're at 11, that's a crazy number. Now my question would be, do we see a risk in the overhead if we don't go to 15? Excuse me, sorry, misspoke. Overtime.
Laura, you want to talk about this? I mean,
I was just going to say, Laura.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
If we don't go to $15 for guards and keep it at $13.50, is there a risk of having to increase our overtime? Because
Sure. It would either be an increase to overtime if we don't have an adequate number of bodies to fulfill the hours, or it would be a reduction in the number of hours, the pool schedule, in order to accommodate what we have brought on and what hours those people can work.
okay, so the question becomes, can we fill the positions we need at $13.50 as opposed to 15?
I believe it will help significantly. because it puts us in a different, at a different starting pay than some of our competitors.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can see how it goes for 2022, and if we need to make an adjustment.
Right.
But I could support 1350 and cover the certification.
So what I'm hearing is that what's currently in the budget is 15, and we're going to change it to 1350, and then add on, I believe, 22,475 for the certifications to the budget.
Yeah,
Correct.
so we gain 39,000 by going from 15 to 1350, right, Laura? And then out of that, the 22.5.
Correct.
So we're still a little bit ahead.
Thank you all for the discussion. Much appreciated. The lifeguards, thank you.
Oh. Bob and then Sarah. Yeah.
A question of either Laura or Aaron. If we paid for certifications, do the kids pay it up front and then get reimbursed immediately so they may quit? Or is there some sort of hook to keep them in the position for a period of time before they get their full amount of money back?
We can look at a variety of different ways to implement that. The aquatics team has lots of ideas, from paying at some kind of deposit up front, which they get back, or working a certain number of hours, then they receive the reimbursement back. So there are a lot of different options that we can explore.
Yeah, I don't want to see us pay for somebody to be certified, do one day's worth of work, and then go somewhere else and get $18 an hour.
Us either. We want them to stay.
Sarah, did you need to say something? Yeah.
I completely agree with right now we're going through this with my store. We're all at 15. My question for Laura, are we at staggered? So if you have guards that we really like and they come back, do you have them at a higher rate, or are they all at the?
It's primarily by position. We have done that in the past where we have had some staff that have been around for a certain number of years, and then we will pay them a little bit more to keep them for that extra summer. So we have done that, but a majority of people are within at that starting rate. Now, if they obtain a different certification, if a lifeguard obtains a pool operator's license, then we would give them they move into a different pay category. That help answer?
Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we need to do this in the form of a motion?
If there's general agreement amongst the board.
It sounds like there is. Does anybody object to going from 15 to 1350, but covering the certification and recertification costs? Well, without objection, then.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So I want to be, quite clear about this, because these are other things that are included in this draft. I spoke to this earlier regarding the merit and the move to pay grade minimum for Archer. I guess I'm asking, I hope I can leave those in. Or as we go to draft 2. Again, the seasonal staff for watersheds, natural areas, rec areas, and pathways. I think that total is 119,000. Just want to make sure we're going to leave.
Oh, yeah, right.
Are we changing the level of service? Are we, because what I felt like I heard from Hank earlier is that we reduced it. We expected the members just to be upset with us, and we didn't hear that. So I'm trying to figure out what we're doing with seasonal.
Let me ask Mike Mack to jump on here, if he can unmute.
Yep, I'm here. Yeah, we have absolutely reduced the level of service. Probably not showing right now but it's obviously accumulating as the months go on. And if we send to another year, then people will start to notice. We've mulched less, we've weeded less, we've attacked invasives less, we've cut the grass less, picked up the trash less. Just about every single service has been reduced and scaled back, and you've got all the managers and supervisors actually out doing those jobs as well. So noticeable now, probably not. I mean, I notice it obviously because we've up certain accustomed to a certain standard, but most people wouldn't notice it on the daily. But if we keep it up for another 6 months, year, whatever, I think the facilities and everything will start to show that we've reduced our service.
Madam President?
Yes, Tim.
I wanted to point out that the Environmental Advisory Committee also strongly recommended that we restore seasonal workforce and budget supplies, training, wildlife control, and related expenses for natural area management.
Thank you, Tim. Does anybody have any objection to what is in the budget? Doesn't look like, oh, Jennifer, yep.
I don't have a comment. I have an objection. I think that we went down a road to try it out. We have not heard back from the membership, and why would we not at least stick to the course of action and see if it keeps working or if it hurts us?
Okay.
Well, we on the front lines, I mean, we obviously noticed the reduction in services. I mean, our standards are pretty high. And we've got people, we've actually extended into some overtime. Our grounds guys are working 5-10 hour days a week. So we've touched in some overtime to try to catch up and keep up. And like I said, we've got supervisor managers out, emptying trash cans and stuff, which is fine. It's what we do. Everybody does everything top to bottom. But it's really extending people. I mean, we haven't had a late seasonal in almost 2 years, a natural area seasonal. Construction department hasn't had their seasonals, tennis. So, and Laura can attest to the clay court starting to show a little bit of wear, but we just right now don't have enough boots on the ground to have the level of service that resting people are used to providing. I mean, we're doing a pretty good job of masking it, I guess, but I don't like it. But you're right, we have not had a whole lot of complaints. So up to you guys. I mean, we'd like to keep the level of service high, and we're thinking a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road where things will really start just decreasing and then people will notice. So we're trying to get ahead of it.
And Mike, I very much appreciate it. This isn't about not appreciating that you guys have a high level of service. I very much appreciate that. For me, it's we talk a lot about, we'll hear from our members if something is upsetting to them, and we tried it and we didn't hear from the members. So that's what it's about. It's not trying to overwork central services facility. It's not trying to undervalue, underappreciate. It's, what is it that the members are expecting? And if we're providing the value that they're expecting, that I don't think that they would expect us to raise their assessments to provide a higher value than their expectation.
No, I agree. I'm not saying that you're saying anything against us. No, we're busting butt and we're doing a pretty good job. I just, it's like, running a marathon, something, I don't know how long you can sustain it and keep it going before you either burn out and then the service does decrease, or, eventually I'm saying it's going to catch up to us. It's only been a year and a half, and eventually it will catch up to us. And
Could this be addressed by adding, adding staffing? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Didn't mean to butt in.
It's okay. Just raise your hand. Just raise your hand. Just a reminder to raise your hand. Go ahead.
Good. Fire away. Good.
So Mike, I just have a quick question. One is if you can, and you don't have to give me the answer right now, if you could send it. overtime numbers compared to 2019 and your 2021 forecast. Because I'm a little confused when it comes to, we've reduced services, but if our supervisors are doing it, are we really being, sort of penny wise, pound foolish? So I'm just trying to understand, how does this work? Have we actually cut down the number of times we're mowing? Or are we just having high paid supervisors now out there mowing instead of seasonal staff? And are we paying them in overtime instead of just adding it to our seasonal budget?
No, it's a combination. It's a combination of both. We're mowing less, and to the average person, they're not going to notice. I mean, which isn't good for the turf, and so we're fertilizing less and things like that because we don't have the time. I mean that, over a year or two, you can survive that. It's like your own front lawn. You don't take care of it for a year, so it'll be okay. But then it starts kicking and starts getting worse. And we do have people out, higher paid people out doing it. We're just, we're providing less of a service, and I personally don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable because we were at a certain standard, and I'm a bit of an anal nitpicker. Larry knows that. But the roadways cutting way less, and we're not edging them and things like that. And to the most people, they're not going to pick up on that, but to us, I do. So yeah, the overtime's definitely increased. The grounds crew's working 50 hours a week, a lot of them instead of 40. We've got pathways guys covering for the facility monitor, which we couldn't find one. And we've got other people just being stretched thin, and you can do it for a while, but after a while, on all the fronts, it's going to take its toll.
If you could give us that number, I think it'll put it in perspective for us.
Okay.
Just 2019 to 2021 forecast.
Can do.
Thank you.
I saw Tim, and then I saw John, I think, and then Scott.
I think that the reduction has been mischaracterized a bit. This wasn't, as I understand it, Larry can correct me if I'm wrong, this wasn't a pilot program to see if we could save money and not have any reaction from members. This was the result of loss in revenue from COVID and some belt tightening as a result of COVID. But as a result of that, as a result of having cut back on staff and supplies, there's a backlog in projects. And it's not simply an aesthetic issue, it's an environmental issue. So I would ask the board to keep that in mind as they're considering whether, as I understand it, we're simply restoring the resources back to where they were prior to the cuts. And these aren't the kinds of things that members are going to pick up the phone and complain about immediately. But as Mike says, over time, the damage will surface, and then we'll get the complaints. Thank you.
Yeah, 100% right. Invasives, property encroachments, trees. Our tree log is way backed up, and we can't catch up with that. And we're using people from other departments to cross-train and help them. So you're right. The impact down the road will be noticeable and hopefully not permanent. We're just trying to stay in front of it.
John, you had a comment?
I just, I'm torn on this. I appreciate what Jennifer said about what level of service we can afford to provide. We want to provide the very best, but sometimes we need to decide, we're going to settle for a Chevrolet instead of a Lexus, and secondly, so that, I know you're a perfectionist, Mike, and that's one of the things we most love about you, but we need to calibrate the level of service that we can afford to offer. And I agree with Sarah too. I'm hoping that if we add additional seasonal workers, that will lower overtime, and I'm very interested in that too. So any information you can give us on that, Mike and Larry, I'd appreciate. Any reasonable predictions?
Not a
I
problem.
believe you were next. Did you still want to say something, Scott?
I did, but I can wait my turn if.
I think you were up next, I believe.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify because it says come up and it was more of a as Tim correctly said, it was a COVID decision that Hank was basically like, we cut wherever we could cut, and just here's where everything fell, and everyone pretty much was like, all right, that's good. We're trying to save money. One question to Mike is that you mentioned the mowing, and it is something that I've noticed, but I didn't know if it was our issue or VDOT, but some of the roadways, right? Like the medians in between some of the roads around Reston, that's technically us. That's RA, or is that VDOT?
It's VDOT property, which we're contracted to mow.
Gotcha. So from a fiscal perspective, and more in Anthony's and Tony's camp here, of legally, I don't know what the ramifications are, but there have been, so there's certain roads with hills, and making certain turns, it becomes hazardous to even see cars passing. And so, if you get into an accident, maybe the person's, whatever the reasons are, but the maintenance issue, it becomes beyond a maintenance issue potentially. And so that's where, from a fiscal perspective, maybe you want to look at. Now, theoretically, it should be covered from insurance, but I don't know if does that necessarily look good on the board of saying, hey, we decided to cut these costs or keep them cut. And then the other thing too is the trees. There's been a lot of storms, and maintenance is a persistent issue. So having that, and these trees keep getting older and older, and it's something that I do know that most people in my neck of the woods do gripe about, because there are plenty of trees that go left to be natural. We'll say that. So it is something that memberships, at least that I know of and speak to, are aware of. They might just not complain to the board about it.
Larry, can you remind, what is the dollar amount that we're talking about to restore?
I think it's 119,000.
It is 119. Yep.
119, yeah. And that's across the four cost centers that I referenced earlier.
Can I just add a comment?
Yes, Sarah, go ahead. Yeah.
Larry, and this was, so VDOT pays us for, is it 4 mowings a year? But we were doing a lot more than that. And that was why Hank made that call. And is there any way, I think it's time, guys, we start renegotiating these contracts. We have, with you and Tony, we have great negotiators on our side. Is there a way we can go back and get, this is what our community needs, so this is how many times we need to mow, and get them up to where we want them to be?
I'll be very blunt here. Yeah, VDOT doesn't care about Reston or how the roads mowed. They'll pay us for 3 mowings, and that's it. Occasionally we've slipped an invoice in for a 4th one, and they pay us. But you see the county parkway, you see other places, if you drive around Northern Virginia, that they cut it 3 times, and it's really long, it's really unsightly. And we've always cut it probably 22, 24 times. I mean, we edge it and we try to clean the gutter pans and stuff. We've raised the standard for Reston because it makes the whole community look better, makes property values stay stable. But I've tried to negotiate with VDOT, and quite frankly, they don't care. We'll take the contract because we want to keep the Reston standard high. If we didn't get the contract and somebody else did, then they would cut it 3 times, and you would see there'd be a significant people would not be happy.
I also remember a few years ago when remember the contract renewal process was delayed.
Correct.
I think that was Hank's first year.
Yeah, you know what hit the fan? It hit the fan hard.
Yeah. So, okay, if we're not all in agreement on this, I guess we need to have a vote. Jennifer, are you an objection? Are there other objections?
Could we get the numbers and then make a decision, or do we need to decide on this right now? Like, Larry, do you need an answer right away?
Yeah, I mean, my intent is, without you telling me to take it out of the current draft 1, we'll leave it up. My intent would be to leave it in there, but provide you additional information so that at a future discussion, if you want to make a decision then with newer information, you can do so.
Yeah, and we've got 2 public hearings. Who knows, it might come up. a member may bring it up.
One other thing, I just not to dwell on the VDOT mowing, I just want to remind the board that our delegate Plum was successful many years ago in allowing basically one community association in the Commonwealth, that would be us because of our size, to be able to contract directly with VDOT to take care of the roads. I mean, it was a very specific action he took to enable us to even do that. So it's because we're not typically a licensed contractor per se, that everywhere else around the state, as Mike said, they cut 3 times, whether it's a highway or way, etc. So it's something that we worked hard on many years ago to get the, we'll say, honor to be able to mow Reston's roads. And as Mike said, we like to keep that at a pretty high level. So.
Okay, is there anything else that we want to cover that you would like to get from us tonight, Larry?
I think we've covered, I'm just looking at my list here. I think we've covered most of the items. Yeah, I think we're good.
Dave?
I just want to ask kind of a procedural question. When the board votes on items, are they voting to put it in the next draft, or are they voting to approve it for 2022? Because historically, I think the voting on the budget doesn't take place till November. But I mean, it would be good for fiscal when we get together to know if you're approving something for 22, we don't want to spend any time on it. But what's the intent of the vote?
That's a really good question.
Well,
yeah.
If you want me to take it, Dave, it's to include it in draft 2.
That was my impression.
Okay.
Nothing is final until the board votes on the entire package.
That helps us understand. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, with that.
Jennifer has her hand
Oh,
up.
Jennifer.
Before we move away from personnel, I have one more. I'd like to motion to increase the vacancy and attrition savings line to $250,000 in draft 2 of the 22-23 budget.
Can I ask a question, Jennifer? Would that be?
Oh, I would think we need a second, I guess, before you can ask a question.
Yes, I'll second it so I can ask my question. Would the intent of that be to delay some hires so that the overall personnel budget would be less by 250?
No, we currently have, and maybe someone on staff can help me. I know, I want to say it's 177,
Correct.
173, something around there. And so this is the turnover rate. So RA is estimating that here's all of our full-time salaries, here's all of our seasonal salaries. And then this is a factor that says, we know there's going to be turnover. We don't know where it's going to be. So we're going to throw a number at the wall and say, we're going to save about this much. I don't know if Melissa has a calculation specifically that she uses to get to this, but in my experience, since I've been looking at the budget since 2015, really delving in, we have always had a savings at the end of the year on the salary and wages line item. We've always been under budget there. And so if we're not going to reduce it in positions in different places, then I think that we're going to experience the same thing that we've been experiencing the whole time I've been looking at the budget, which is we're going to come in under budget. So let's just say we're going to come in a little bit more under budget than what staff is projecting out.
Do you want to speak to that briefly?
I do. Well, I was actually pretty specific in looking at this, looking at our trend this year, mapping it out for next year, and quite frankly, looking at specific areas of flight risk. So the calculation was pretty thoughtful. So I'm a little worried about going that much higher on vacancy savings.
Excuse me.
Yes, Dave.
How much did we build into the 21 budget, roughly? Do we know?
Vacancy savings? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
We only did just delayed hire savings. We didn't calculate it the same way in 21.
I'm sorry,
We
Melissa,
didn't do
could
the
you say that
turnover, we
again?
only did delayed hiring.
Could you say that again, Melissa, what you said about 21?
We did it based on delayed hire savings, not, we didn't do a calculation like the one that we're doing for 22. Dave, I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
Okay. I was under the impression we did do that. And the reason I ask is that, to Jennifer's point, we're running about 150,000 under salaries and benefits through August. And if we had put in a factor, we're better than that by quite a bit. But again, obviously Melissa knows the numbers better than I do.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed? Abstain? 2, 3
Three.
abstain. 3 abstain, 2 opposed, and there were 4 in favor. So that motion.
5 in favor.
5.
You're in,
1.
you know, I got you, yeah. How many? There were 5 in favor?
5.
5, 3, and 1, okay. Sorry, okay, so that carries. Okay.
We'll include it.
Aaron,
Okay. Yes, Tim?
I just had one thought on Dave Kerr's question earlier, and sorry to be slow on this, but with respect to the senior environmental position, because of the way that motion was worded, I think I'm accurate in saying that one is locked in. That was not a motion to put it in the next draft. That was a motion that was much more categorical. So just for purposes of your work on the committee, the board has approved the hiring of a senior environmental official. Thank you.
Okay. Can we move on to executive session?
Well, there's one other piece,
Oh, one other piece.
the regular agenda, but here's what I'm going to recommend because
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, of course, the funding options.
because of the late hour,
Guys, I sent you guys my motions and I'm not done. So if you guys would like to give your thoughts via email and not have them considered.
Well, I think given the hour and given the number of motions that you have here, and I know I haven't had time to give this much thought today. I don't know about anybody else, but and I'm also not interested in this meeting going until 1 o'clock in the morning. So,
Aaron, if I,
yes.
Jennifer, to help me understand the Shadowwood motion, could that wait till the October meeting? Or were you looking at doing that tonight?
It can wait till the October meeting.
Yeah, I mean, everybody should look at this and give it some thought, and we can certainly communicate with each other.
But can Larry touch on the funding alternatives a little bit? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think that was, did you want to go ahead and do that tonight, Larry?
I just, I've got a rec
Oh, yes,
to discuss, but Bob's got his hand up.
yes, Bob.
Okay, could we put a time limit on responding? So this doesn't drag out for 10 days?
Sure.
So after 5 days, comment, or that's your period of whatever the board chooses to pick. I think, it's kind of like the Shadowwood survey. After a couple of weeks, the substantive issues will have been addressed.
Well, certainly, I would, well, I don't know. What seems reasonable to everybody?
And to be clear, it would be my
Emily?
motions from numbers 2 through 12 minus Shadowwood if you want to take that up at the board meeting instead.
Say that again, Jennifer?
On what I sent, it's numbers 2 through 12 minus 12B, which is Shadowwood. If we're going to take that up at the next board meeting.
Okay, mine, I don't have a 12, I have an 11 with A through G.
Grab my,
And
yes, so it's 1 through 10. No, 1 through 11. Minus number 8. We covered the personnel piece.
Okay.
That's what we covered.
Yep, so 1 through 7, 9 through 11 minus 11B.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. So, yeah, I would say if we can get, your thoughts to Jennifer by the end of the week, if possible, or as soon thereafter as you can.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, Larry, funding options.
So just real quick, because we could spend hours on this. What I presented in the original board packet, and I replicated the last two slides of this, is something that's been discussed at the fiscal committee a number of times about how do we fund our current activities. And we've talked about operating surplus, and it has been used in the past to help pay forward on the assessment. The minimum funding for RRF, which is required by resolution. What Chris has done with the capital budget, well, I think we have some flexibility there to not fund it to the same extent, and also perhaps to use funds from projects, whether CARP or RRF. I'm not going to get into all the detail tonight, as to use that to help pay for current RRF as well. We talk about, we have a very strong cash position. I mean, it comes out each year in the audit as well. So I just want the board and fiscal committee, I suspect this is something the fiscal committee hopefully can talk about at the next meeting, is, which of these make sense, if any of them, given where we're looking to end up at the end of the year, both on a the cash basis, and that's also operating and RRF. So again, we can go down a really, really deep rabbit hole tonight. And I don't know if people want to do that, but I want people to think about, what are some of those strategies that we can utilize our existing resources to help pay for some of the assessment. And I'm not saying, pay it at the 829 level. That number's, it's going to come down. But it's something for this board to think about, because we just haven't, we've talked about it. We've kind of talked in circles around it, but I think it's really time, and hopefully the fiscal committee can discuss this as well, as what makes sense paying this forward.
Mike?
Hi, yeah, Larry, last time we spoke, we were going to talk about financing options, and I don't see that here.
Now, Tom is waiting to get the information back from Truist.
Okay.
They requested a number of documents. Like 3 years past audits and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So, but we should have that soon.
Okay, great, thank you.
But absolutely, no, it is our intent to bring that.
Yeah, I didn't think it was an intentional omission or anything, just timing. Thank you.
Yep, Sarah?
Larry, are you thinking the reduction in triple RF will be continued year on year, or? Because I just feel like those two line items are artificially reducing the budget by $50. But then next year, we're going to have the same conversation all over again. Or are you thinking this will be year on year?
I think, certainly for 1 year, and I think when Chris, Tom, and I were talking, reducing the contribution to triple RF for 2022, we may be able to even do that some, maybe not to the same level in 2023, without jeopardizing the minimum balance that's required to hold.
Yes, Bob?
I may make a request of finance staff to see if we went to a monthly pay instead of a single pay approach, the impact on cash and on operations. How much would it cost us to go? We're going to give up money on investment income, but I think to a lot of people, it's a lot different to come up with, $80 a month than it would be to come up with $720 in one payment. And it may be, it's just an idea, because it would certainly even out our cash flow. We sit with 10 million plus dollars in cash throughout a significant portion of the year. That just seems kind of crazy to me. Yeah, but if it turns out to be a loser situation, then forget I said it.
Yeah, we can certainly look into that, Bob. I think the key and will be, we are expense heavy in the center months of the year with all the the programming, the seasonal staff and so forth. And so the question would be, would that be adequate to cover those periods? And a lot of that depends on how many people would choose to take a 12-month, unless what you're, I didn't maybe get this, is we just do 12 months and no other options.
I think there is a certain segment of our population that will pay it all in one fell swoop. And I'm one of the lucky ones that can't afford to do that, but I would. But I think offering it to a segment of our membership, which I believe would be a less than 50%, might be a way of, lessening the pain of an increase, whatever that increase it might be.
Okay.
Karen. This is
Yes.
Jennifer.
Oh,
All
I
right.
don't see you.
I know. I'm sorry. Skylar woke up. I had to put it back down. I think that it's in our resolutions, the payment plan. And I think that if we want to do a motion for BGC to take this up at one of their meetings to examine a monthly payment option, which would include, working with Tom and fiscal on what that means for the association, that might be an appropriate course of action.
So this is Scott, if I could chime in on that comment. Or if this is a board.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
From what I've seen with other businesses, that usually the monthly pay option is not for more regular payment options, I guess. It becomes what management indicated is that they were having issues collecting payment in general. And so if you have people that are on these payment collection cycles and they click, auto pay, it can become more of a nightmare for that thing to get turned off, and the payments of it could be a little bit, we could get a large influx of cash and then it could be a large outflow of cash, and it could just be more of an accounting nightmare. And then you usually see those monthly payment options come through for businesses that are expected to have a significant amount of user base growth over time. So like the Netflixes of the world, they're expected to grow leaps and bounds each year. So they're getting a monthly subscription base. In this case, we know the number of users that we have, the users, quote unquote, right? In this case, it's the membership, it's the 21,000 and change individuals. So whether or not, we're happy to look into a more recurring, just in general, the monthly option can become, it's easier for people to forget. And so all of a sudden they're saying, hey, I left 6 months ago. I forgot to turn this off. I need 6 months of payment back or whatever it is, versus at least getting the annual statements right now. It's the people either know they've moved or they haven't. So it's, that's just the path I can kind of foresee, but general comment, we're happy to look into that if you all would like us to.
Good. I think this is worth discussing at a later time.
Yep.
Yes, Aaron?
I was just going to say, I think there might be some merit to it just from a psychological standpoint. I figure sooner or later, all the gas stations are going to switch to liters, just so that gas will be under $1. And we won't notice when they raise it by 1 penny, it's going up by 4 pennies.
Yeah, it's like the pound of coffee, there's 13 ounces. Yeah. Okay.
I think Bob's got his hand up again.
Yes,
Just
Bob.
one little tidbit. I did an analysis of 2021 receipts, and by the end of June, we received 97% of total assessments that were budgeted. So people do pay. In fact, it's right around March 1st is an avalanche of payments, but that's the way everything is structured right now. So I hadn't thought of the Netflix model, but very thoughtful comment, Scott.
Yes, John?
Real quickly, I suspect that if we did monthly payments, it would make it more costly for us to borrow because of the less assured revenue stream. I may be wrong, but.
Good point.
Yeah, the best.
I have not been extending the time of this meeting, and Tony hasn't been nudging me about that, but I think we were on the agenda said we were going to finish at 10 o'clock.
I checked with Tony. He said it only needed to be done on regular board meetings.
Thank you. I had a feeling that was the case. Thank you, Aaron. Okay. However, I am reaching the point of no return. I don't know about anybody else. So if there are no objections, I'd like a motion to move into executive session.
So move.
Second.
Okay, so thank you, Fiscal Committee. for being with us. Larry, I would like to include you in the executive session, but if you are willing.
Sure.
And the rest of you, we will see you later, and thank you.
Karen, just to confirm, you won't want me in this executive session?
It's your choice, Tony.
It's up to the board whether they want me present or not.
Hey, did we vote?
Yeah, we did.
We did not.
I'm sorry?
We did not vote on whether to go in executive session.
Yes. Yes, we did. We had a second and we voted, did we not? Am I crazy?
Yep.
There-
We didn't vote.
There were no objections.
Okay. I'm fine with that, but I don't
Okay.
think Tony is.
I'll have to look at.
Do you want me to run through it again,
Can we just vote?
just in case? All those in
Aye.
favor?
How about
All
we
those
just
in
pass?
favor?
Aye, voting aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, the motion carries. Okay. Okay, we all back? Let me see. Aaron, Bob, Karen, Jennifer, John, Larry, Mike, Sarah, Tim. Okay. Are we all out of the breakout room?
Yeah,
Yes.
Tom O'Karen was gone, so.
His iPad died, so he dropped off a while back.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, I move that the Restaurant Association Board of Directors certifies to the best of each member's knowledge that only those matters appropriate for executive session of a pending contractual and personnel nature were heard, discussed, or considered by the board during executive session.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. John, did I read your lips correctly?
I saw that, John.
Sorry, I
You can record
abstained.
it, the
I
minutes, yeah.
abstained. I abstained.
You abstain? Oh, okay. Were there any other abstentions on that? Okay. All right, then if there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
And many seconds. Any objections? Thank you all. Thank you all.
Hey, it's not 1 o'clock.
It's not.
Right.
It's not. Okay. Does that mean that I owe you a beer, Larry?
No, we're good.